regarding Passover, making a connection between these names of Jethro and the fact that he was from the house of Midian and the brothers of Midian. And now we're looking at the ordinance of Passover and how we can make a connection to what's transpiring here. And I want to take you back to Exodus chapter 12 again, where in verse 13 and in verse 23, Yahweh speaks, and he says, since we were looking at the ordinance of Passover, and we found out who can participate in it and not. No stranger or foreigner or hired servant can. Only those who have been redeemed and circumcised can. Did you hear what I just said? So that really exposes who's a believer or not. If you act like a stranger and a foreigner and a hired servant in the house of Yahweh, you may not have been redeemed. Whew. Exodus 12, 13, and 23 says, when Yahweh sees the blood, he will pass over. The word for Passover here is the word Pesach, and of course it means to pass over, to be lame, but it can also mean to be dislocated. The root stem is the letters Pe and Samek. That is the word pas, and it means to stripe or to strip something, like you would peel the bark on it. It can mean something that is striped, like a multicolored garment. Remember Joseph's coat of many colors? That's where you get the word pas, his garment. Incidentally, it can also refer to the palm of the hand or the soles of the feet. That word kaf, also known as the hollow part. Now pay attention here, because when I saw the word hollow part, it immediately connected me, and hopefully connects you, back to Jacob. You remember when Jacob wrestled with the angel? And Jacob is touched in the hollow of his thigh. He's touched here, and if you go back and remember looking at it, he halted upon his thigh. He was made lame. There's a connection to the Passover and what happened to Jacob. You need to see this, because we're going to connect Passover and circumcision right here. When it says that he was touched in the hollow of his thigh, the word thigh there is the word yerek, and it means thigh, but it specifically is referring to the loins of the man. Remember, you're to have your loins girt about with truth. That's the procreative portion of a man. Yahweh uses physical analogies to demonstrate spiritual principles. When it says that Jacob was touched in the hollow of his thigh, it was not this hollow part of the thigh. It was talking about the center of the loins of man, in specific the area that would be considered his private parts. And the purpose for that is that Yahweh's trying to remind you, Jacob, you are about to have a change in the flesh. He wrestles with Yahweh, and his flesh is circumcised. I firmly believe Jacob was circumcised at that time. You say, well, Abraham had already circumcised his household. Of course. Even today, rabbis will redo a circumcision. If you have been circumcised previously and are outside a covenant relationship, they will take you. They can't, since there's no foreskin, they can't go back and redo the circumcision. However, they will prick you and let blood flow, which I believe was exactly what took place right here. Why? Jacob's name is changed. He goes from being the carnal man, Jacob, to one called Yisro, one who no longer walks after the flesh. What? His flesh is halted. His flesh is lame now. His flesh is not in control. His flesh doesn't have the power that it once had. Who does? The Jacob, the Yisro that walks in that body now. Can you see that? You remember Abraham and Eleazar. When he said, Eleazar, I want you to go find a wife for my son Isaac, and he has him to put his hand under his thigh. You remember when Jacob's lying on his deathbed and he says, Joseph, I want you to swear, enter into a covenant with me. He has Joseph put his hand under his thigh. The same thing's taking place as you see there with Jacob. It's talking about putting his hands under the private part of the man, and it sounds very crude, but what's taking place is that Yahweh wants you to know that out of the loins of the man issues the seed that will change this man from a fleshly, carnal-driven individual into one who is led by the Spirit of Yahweh, and it's His Word that will change us. That's why the flesh has got to be broken off. It's got to be controlled. Now, the sages teach us, in that particular verse there, if you go back and read it, the word blood's mentioned multiple times. The sages teach us that because of it, it should have been read, when I see the bloods, plural, damim, rather than dam for blood. And they teach that it's actually a reference to circumcision and Passover, which is exactly what you and I are talking about. Well, see, we've lost the understanding. Do you remember when the lamb was slaughtered at Passover? What does the lamb represent? The lamb represents the Messiah, right? And it represents the Messiah dying in the flesh or having his flesh cut off. Can you see it? Circumcised. He was, Isaiah 53 says he was cut off from the earth. His generation was what? Cut off. So it's telling you that his flesh was circumcised from the earth. Now, if you go back and look at what takes place in Exodus chapter 12, the lamb is slain, and where's the blood placed? I had a physical demonstration last night, and we could, if we were to turn and look at the door that enters into this house, the blood was placed on the doorpost, which are the two side posts, and then the lintel. And it forms the Hebrew letter kit. The kit is the protected place, right? Well, it also, if you remember, it's a euphemistic or metaphorical term representing the man, because the house represents the man. Inside the house is everything that will ever affect not only me, my wife, my children, but my grandchildren, and all those will issue forth out of me. Can you see that? And so in order to protect the firstborn that's inside the house, you see what I'm saying? Yahweh took the blood, circumcised flesh, the blood from that circumcised flesh, and where does he do it? He strikes the doorpost. If you looked at the demonstration of the man, he would have been striking him in the thigh. He would have went up this leg, across the thigh, across the waist, and down the leg. Why? Because this becomes the protected place. The thigh, the loins. That's why you're told to gird your loins. Protect them. Put the kit, the blood on the loins. Can you see that? That's why circumcision's important. It means that we bring this flesh under control, and it took the lamb being slaughtered so that you could walk in newness of life. This is so powerful. Now, the house represents a man who was struck in his thigh, the loin, circumcised in order to preserve the firstborn. Listen to this. The blood of the lamb represents Messiah. Remember the word pas means striped. The lamb represents the Messiah that was striped, his joints dislocated. Remember the word kaf, palms and soles of his feet pierced, his flesh circumcised, cut off, so that the coat of many colors, the pas, the sign of the firstborn, could be passed on to those that were inside the house or inside the loins. Y'all see that? Isn't that powerful? Now, Isaiah 53:8 says that he was cut off. I shared that with you earlier. Now, you have to ask yourself, what did this have to do with Zipporah? Remember, Jethro brings her back. And you know that I told you earlier, she was sent away by Moses prior to this because she rejects the covenant. And we looked at what her name means. And I believe that we've got enough evidence to lend credence to what I'm trying to propose to you, is that she rejected the covenant of circumcision, also known as the covenant of redemption. And so he sends her back. Well, now let's ask why, what she has to do with it. Well, you have to go back to Exodus chapter 4, verse 22 through 26. Can y'all indulge me just a few minutes longer? I'm trying to cover this as quickly as I can. Is it boring to you? Exodus chapter 22, let's look in, Exodus chapter 4, verse 22. This is Yahweh speaking to Moses. And you shall say to Pharaoh, thus saith Yahweh, Israel is my firstborn, my firstborn. I say unto you, let my son go, that he may serve me. But if you refuse to let him go, behold, I'll kill your son, even your firstborn. Well, that's what happened with that last plague, the 10th plague. Well, isn't it ironic? We haven't even gotten there yet, and Yahweh's speaking about the firstborn, and he's speaking about the plague that's going to strike that firstborn. Well, as soon as Yahweh charges Moses and tells him to go tell Pharaoh that, and he specifically tells Moses Israel is his firstborn, and he's telling Moses in advance, I'm going to have a plague strike the house of Egypt, and it's going to cut off the firstborn of Egypt. He sends Moses to do a job, and then the next thing you see, look at it, verse 24. I read this, and I'm thinking Yahweh was out of his mind. I mean, how many times have you read this? And it came to pass by the way in the end that the Lord, Yahweh, met him and sought to kill him. I'm thinking, well, you just gave him a job to do and now he's going to kill him? Are you hearing me? It puts you in a position where if you don't go back and look at this in the Hebrew language, that you're missing what's happened. And most people just skim over it, bypass around it, don't touch it, don't address it. Well, verse 25 says, Zipporah took a sharp stone, cut off the foreskin of her son, and cast it at his feet. And then she said, surely a bloody husband are you to me. Now, you remember Zipporah was the daughter of who? Yisro. She's a Midianite. She's not from the house of Israel, right? Well, Pharaoh had an adopted son named Moses. And so Moses is the heir apparent to Egypt. But this son who is unnamed here, we find out later his name is Gershom, and his name means stranger. And so we see that all of the strangers are going to be cut off. Well, the strangers are those, you and I. That's who's being represented here. What's happened is Yahweh says, Moses, you haven't circumcised your own firstborn. You go back to Egypt. You're an Egyptian. She's not from the house of Israel. Your son's going to die. You see what I'm saying? Which means you and I would have been cut off. Can you see that? So what Zipporah does, she not only saves her own son, but she saves Moses. Here's a woman at this time that's acknowledging the covenant of circumcision. Are you following me? And she's acknowledging what needs to take place in order for the house to be redeemed. The son had to die. Can y'all see that? Well, again, the word Gershom means stranger. The son that represents those who are uncircumcised in the last days. She has another son, Eliezer, which means Yahweh's my help. Why? Because he was the one that helped, that Yahweh delivered rather, Moses from Pharaoh. And it says something odd. In the King James English, you'll miss it. We talked about it last night. It says she takes the bloody foreskin and casts it at his feet. I'm going to show you that's not what took place. The word for feet here, regalim in Hebrew, means feet, but it's also throughout the Torah euphemistically used to represent the private part of the male anatomy, the genitals, in a number of different translations. You hear what I just said? She circumcises her son, the firstborn. And what she do? She takes that bloody flesh. Now you need to understand something. That the covenant of redemption is bloody. Are y'all with me? She takes that. Moses is standing there. If you go back and look at the next verse, it says, verse 26, so he let him go. It's evident to me, I believe with all my heart, that Moses was being restrained physically. And I believe Moses is standing in front of Zipporah, who just circumcised her son. She takes the bloody flesh and that blood, and she flings it not at Moses' feet. She flings it at Moses' private parts, striking him on the doorposts and the lintels. Same picture that you see in Exodus chapter 12, where the entrance, the door to the house is preserved. Why? If it hadn't have been, then the firstborn, the son, would not have been preserved. Can you see that? Isn't that powerful? Hidden right there in front of us. Now, she says, surely to Moses, you're a bloody husband to me. Now, you know the word for dam there, for blood is the word dam, but the word husband is the word kathan. And again, it happens to take us all the way back to the name father-in-law. Jethro was a father-in-law. So remember, it also means bridegroom, but it can mean circumcised as well. And it can also, in its context, mean or infer the idea of faith in Yahweh. So basically what's happened, when she cast the blood, not at her son's feet, but upon Moses' loins, marking him in the same manner as the doorposts upon the houses of Israel while they were in Egypt, she then tells Moses, you are a blood-circumcised one to me. Now, again, as you continue to look at that, it implies that we couldn't partake of the redemption without the man of flesh dying for us. Our own flesh isn't suitable. Are you hearing me? It had to be the flesh of Messiah. Now, in Exodus chapter 18, verse 5, It says, Jethro brought Zipporah and her sons unto Moses. She'd been put away by this time. Okay? Remember, Moses means one from whom the water is drawn. He's the water bearer. Are you following me?